Enrico, you wrote you were talking about economic competitiveness before it was cool, and you wrote this very important report that kind of, I think, has kick-started this conversation that's only getting louder and louder. Given Trump and what's happened in the last 100 days, would you have written it any differently? Maybe with a few more exclamation marks? Capital letters?
No, I think Trump is a great accelerator. It's a great accelerator, but we have to go in the direction of what I think last year in the three reports, Draghi's report, Niinisto on defense, and my report on single market, the direction is there. Now there's an acceleration, and the acceleration is also because of what is happening around us, not only because of Trump, but first of all because of Trump. What is, in my view, very important is the fact that I think you live in Brussels, and you know that these topics were not the center of the discussion in Brussels 2 years ago and in the last years. Now they are, and I think it's the precondition to act, as Minister Domanski just said. And in Europe, is not acting doesn't mean, I would say it in American bureaucratic terms, the orders, the operational orders, executive orders by Trump. We don't have executive orders in Brussels, and we don't have one signature. We have, I don't know how many signatures that are necessary to act. But the precondition to act is to have a consensus on a strategy. And today the strategy is there. So I think now the main problem is to be able to implement. I think what Domanski just said about savings and investments union is very important. I am a little bit, I will read the text that the Commission will present next week on single market, because we are waiting for this text on the single market. And I have to say I'm very much interested in reading the proposals probably in the next months on telecom and energy. Because if I may say, we are here in a security conference, and thank you very much for the invitation. It's a privilege to be here. Why we are discussing about competitiveness in a security conference? Because security today has changed in terms of meaning. And in my view, Henry, the big change was after the sentence of Elon Musk to the Ukrainians. When Elon Musk said to the Ukrainians, I translate, behave, otherwise I switch off. And this statement to say, you are depending on me, on what I can do or what I can't do, is something that is changing everything. So the independence, autonomy of the European Union on technology, financial markets, energy, and of course defense, is something that today has a different meaning in comparison of what was 2 or 3 years ago. So the security conference has a different and a broader sense, and this is why also my report was also a report on security, even if single market wasn't in the past considered a meaning for security. But today, this broader concept of security is there.
Thank you. Alina, we're talking a lot about transatlantic issues today. I mean, how much of it is a double-edged sword, though, when it comes to economic security? Because in many ways, as Enrico says, when you have an America that's less helpful to Europe, it makes Europe realize that the stuff it's got to fix. But at the same time, a trade war, concerns over economic collaboration makes it harder to improve competitiveness, right? Because you've got literally just got less money around. How do you see that double-edged sword?
Well, thanks for that very easy question, Henry. I know you're known for easy questions, and since I'm the voice from Washington here, I'll do my best to answer it, but I'm not sure it'll be very satisfying. If I may, I wanted to just respond to what Prime Minister said about the importance of talking about tech and competitiveness in the context of security. Because this, to my mind, has been a huge division between Europe and the United States that for a long time, not just the last administration, but really started some time ago, we in Washington and the US have been thinking about national security, have been thinking about the importance of technology and leading and tech innovation as part of also our own collective security, not just our national security in the United States. And for many years, I would come to Brussels and the European capitals with a few exceptions, and I would say, we should be really talking about cooperation on tech. And people will look at me with these huge eyes, why are you bringing this up? We're talking about defense and security. So I'm really glad to see this conversation shifting now. I think it's a really important moment. And it's a challenging moment. Henry, as you're alluding to the tensions on the economic trade side that we have in the relationship. But, I was just at a conference before I flew here in Washington where we had a conversation almost around these same issues. And what I really took away from that discussion is that there is a lot to play for in a pragmatic way. There's a lot for Europe to play for with the United States. If we stop looking at what the president says on Truth Social or what Elon Musk says, there's a lot that we need to get done together. And I do mean need, because we have a huge opportunity. We have a huge opportunity to build a global digital infrastructure, a future economic model that I think is going to look profoundly different than the economic model we have today. In Europe, that will require all the things that you have written about and talked about in the single market and combining capital markets. That's critical. But before we even get there, which is a long way away, there's a lot of things that Europeans can be doing to invest, I think, more strategically and more intentionally in the areas where Europe can still compete. And that's not going to be in the large hyperscaler, LLM frontier model space, but it is going to be in building on that platform, right? So the idea of AI factories, as some folks in the tech sector talk about. So there's a lot of opportunity here, and I would really hate to see this moment be lost, because I'm concerned that in the next 5 years, unless something shifts quite dramatically, that Europe and the United States are going to be so far apart on this particular issue that we're not going to be able to actually work together, because the US has more money, we have more competitive companies, and we're moving much, much faster, and I'm not sure Europe is quite there when it comes to particularly focusing on innovation and investment in innovation and competitiveness versus focusing on being a regulatory powerhouse for the global future.
Thank you. Well, Marta, if we had the European, the American, and now you've got to do both with your two hats on. Do you agree with that statement that Europe and America are drifting apart on these issues? And if we don't do something about it, they could be quite far apart in 5 years' time?
I think that would be a nuanced answer to say that there are reasons to worry that that drift is happening, but I definitely agree with what Alina said, that there is so much we need to do together, and there is this urgency exists, and I think, look, we have only 20 minutes, so I'm going to be more outspoken than I would be if we had the full hour. But I think the debate around technology now in the transatlantic discussion is ill-informed, it's dangerous, and it's in many ways disinforming. And it's just very scary to think we can still fuel the discussion about why we need to work together on the defense side and on the energy side, and it's really hard to comprehend why technology has become such a rift. And from where I sit, I think this is unfortunately on the European, on the Europeans, on many legacy industries in Europe that have informed that debate. And don't get me wrong, there are many things we should discuss, and there is a lot Europe can bring into this discussion. And U.S. tech sector has been accepting that there are specifics around technology that Europe demands, and I think we as a sector have proved to be a trusted partner on that journey. But it is scary to see that we can't find that platform that would be bringing us closer. And I hope this is going to change. And I think we're getting to a point when as Alina says, we're either gonna drift apart, and in a few years, wake up in a scenario that, again, would be probably much more difficult for Europe than it would be for the US, or we will actually use this. I know this doesn't sound very obvious today, but we will use this moment to think about what a digital trade agreement could look like. How we can pick what Europe needs today and US can offer. In the same way, we often think about defense and energy exchange. And just last week, Commissioner Šefčovič was in the US, and the idea emerged of 50 billion additionally in trade, which Financial Times covered. Thank you, Henry. I learned from your piece. So the 50 billion should go into defense and energy. Why not technology? These are so closely related. There is no defense and energy security today without technology. Another thing to keep in mind is that it's not just the platforms and social media, and of course things that Elon Musk says are also not helpful for this debate, but it's much more profound and much more broader, and I'm truly concerned about the nature of the debate that we're in. But at the same time, I'm very hopeful that it got so bad that maybe it's going to be a wake-up call for many of us. And I think, look, we got to a moment of honesty. Many things that used to be said behind closed doors, and companies also didn't often want to discuss in public now are all out there. Like, this is a public debate, and I hope it's going to get us to a point when we're going to end up with a digital trade agreement.
Enrico, in writing your report, you had the privilege of traveling all across Europe, talking to lots and lots of companies and individuals, officials. Did you get the sense of what Marta just talked about, that there is this kind of European fear around tech that they don't have in defense and energy to the same extent? And do you think that's because we don't have the players here to compete? There's this kind of worry that if these American tech companies were to turn adversarial, we'd have nowhere else to go?
But in reality, what we are missing, or what we missed in the last 20 years, are two aspects that are both related to single market. First, the dimension, so the European market that doesn't exist on that. Second, the way to funding in a different way, to have private funding. That is, once again, related to the single market, because the lack of European capital markets union, there's an easy link with the previous debate and what Minister Domanski said. It is clearly there. In the last 15 years in the US, the big and the most important achievement was the multiplication 4 times of the private investments on R&D. 4 times in 15 years. And the public investment was flat, but the private one, 4 times. And it is this point on artificial intelligence and space that are the 2 topics probably most interesting today. It is clear that the American successes are not driven by public money. They're driven by private money. And this is, on this point, we are missing in action. And we are missing in action for a very simple reason, because we don't have a European financial market. We have 27. And if we have 27, each country has to put its own narrative of a national, but we are too small. You know very well this story of the 2 group of European countries, the small European countries and the countries they don't know they are small. This is the way in which the European Union is organized. We are all small countries in comparison with the US, with China, with India. So the only way is to be together. But we don't have a financial market on how to, mobilize private funding. And we don't have a European financial market also on the reason why I put at the center of the report the 5th freedom. The fifth freedom is the idea to say the single market is known as the market of the four freedoms. Freedom of movement of goods, services, capitals, and people is not enough because it is clearly missing the intangible. And the intangible is today what is driving progress and development. And it is clear that the fifth freedom, that means innovation, knowledge, skills, has to be the center of the next years. I'm happy because for instance, last Monday at the Élysée, von der Leyen and Macron launched a program that goes in that direction. But we, if we don't have the capacity to mobilize private funding to go there, I think all these projects at European level will miss something that is crucial, because at the end of the day, the engine has to be this kind of engine.
Alina, you wanted to jump in?
Just to jump in a little bit, and maybe just 2 points picking up on, I think, a really important point that Marta made, but I just want to stomp on a little bit more about the notion there's no defense without tech. And of course, we're seeing that so clearly because of the lessons learned in Ukraine. And now that Europe is finally taking the right steps to invest in defense and security, and we've seen a huge uptick in defense tech investment in the private sector in particular. But why is that happening? For 2 reasons. One, because a lot of companies have grown in a huge way, like Helsing, for example, relatively new company that I think is now the most valued defense tech company in Europe, because they were able to test product in Ukraine. And now private sector is getting the right signals from governments and from the Commission that there's going to be a sustained strategy and a vision out there that will sustain this investment. It's not going to be, unsavory anymore to invest in defense. So I think there is a cultural shift happening. And as part of that, we haven't quite reframed what are tech companies. Every company is a tech company now. Car automakers are tech companies. And similarly, I've noticed that tech companies are also now defense companies, right? Like Oracle is a great example. Like a civilian company is making a civilian product, is now doing a lot to develop defense capabilities as well on the digital infrastructure side. So all of these divisions are really starting to blend together in a way that we haven't quite understood. But I think the signal from the public sector, from the government, is so critical, which is why the US model has been so successful, because for decades, the US government took the first steps to invest in innovation after the end of the Second World War. We are going through a restructuring, to be clear, in the United States now, where we're maybe rethinking the success of that, because we are seeing a lot of cuts, whether they'll continue or not, in public spending on foundational research that has led to so much of this success. And we'll see where we land. I would argue that disruption in the tech space is normal and common, and it may not be such a bad thing to rethink what we've been doing for the last 80 years or so, and to refresh it a bit. But I think the signal that Europe needs to take is exactly what you were just saying, that you need the signal from the government, then you get the private sector excited, and we are seeing that in some sectors. But I think the question is, how do you translate that across the board, not just to defense, but to broader tech, as well as to financial services, like the entire economy writ large.
I'm keen to get questions from the audience, but before I do that, Marta, to sort of respond to your question, your statement with another question, what role do big US companies like Google and others have in trying to bridge that gap? I guess some here might see you guys as the problem when actually you're trying to say, no, we can play a role in bridging this. How do you get that message across?
Right, I think when you get through the clickbait of what people think that is the role that we play, at the moment that is very associated with what is the most recent Elon Musk tweet. That is, look, Alina already mentioned Ukraine. US tech companies were the first to show up, not because we only thought it was right, but we had the right technology to do so, and that was the best test to take that I think we passed very well. And there is a lot on the cybersecurity side and defense tech that gave new impetus to, I think, generate innovation ecosystem in Europe. It's all emerging technologies, cloud, quantum, and of course AI. Probably this is what Silicon Valley is mostly thinking about today, likely less concerned about competitiveness in Europe, but mostly interested in the new era of innovation brought by AI. And a Silicon Valley company in Europe thinks about how we can share that momentum. And I think to Prime Minister Letta's point on the need to fund and the need to grow the European ecosystem, like nobody questions that, is that we know how much time and effort and funding it takes to build. And while this process should be definitely taking place, there is this another speed of adoption and figuring out how we can cooperate as allies and partners to build upon what the US ecosystem has already achieved. And this is frankly where I see our role, and we see some great examples in Europe. Ukraine is a difficult one because it wasn't the one that was decided. It was forced, but I think it's a very vivid example. But then Poland is a good example. Google has signed a memorandum of understanding with the Polish Development Fund, and we are currently exploring areas where we can bring technology, and this is not to provide boards on social media, but actually see how we can transform defense, cybersecurity, energy, and healthcare. And this is a process that does involve local companies, where we kind of give a toolbox, and it's the local partners that decide how they want to use it. And this is where I would love to see our usefulness in building European competitiveness. To give the toolbox to bringing also upskilling, as we also believe that that's something we can share, and we're super excited to see wide adoption and demand for skilling. Needless to say, scientific exchange. We were following the Choose Europe event yesterday, and again, I don't think it was a hostile attempt to take over academia ecosystem out of the US and bring it back to Europe, but to talk about more partnerships, which is great to see. I know you started off the discussion with Minister Domański about whether or not we have too much regulation in Europe, but at the end of the day, it's a much broader ecosystem, and this didn't start on January 20th. It dates back, and definitely January 20 gave us more reasons to talk about this more often, and now let's walk the talk.
Do we have any questions from the audience for the panel? Yes. If you could introduce yourself to the audience and keep your question nice and short, that'd be great.
I'm Piotr Błazeusz, General Broni, Lieutenant General. I'm the Eurocorps commander. Two quick ones. One, I heard in Munich somebody saying that Americans invented AI, Chinese have taken it to a different step, and European Union is trying to regulate it. So my question is it really possible, taking the experience from the internet and the US, can you really regulate it? Can you keep the regulations up to speed? And the last one, how you can really enforce it? Are you going to throw it in the industry or create another EU agency that will be trying to enforce it? And my second question is how to strike a good balance between consolidation of defense industry, but also allowing small startups, small companies like the US is doing that are really innovative and are bringing incredible innovations to the table. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, the innovate, duplicate, regulate thing has been the moniker for a while. The Europeans get very upset about it. But Alina, if you want to take that question,
Can
and
I
then
start?
Yeah,
On the question the general posed, which is an excellent question on can you actually regulate technology that hasn't come to its full fruition yet? I think the answer to that is no, because we see that the AI Act, honestly, I think is going to be a disaster in the implementation phase, because it was written and it took time to negotiate, obviously, as legislation does, and it was dead on arrival. I think the reality is that we cannot have some omnibus regulatory package for quantum, for AI, any of these technologies that we don't even know yet what they're capable of. And what I'm concerned is, of course, to your point about China, we're regulating ourselves at the end of the day. And the Chinese don't care, as we've seen with DeepSeek and other developments recently. So I think this is the question we have to ask ourselves. Is this the direction we want to head in? I think this is also why we see a tension with the United States, because the US is like full speed ahead, let's push, 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 and US companies are also on that train, and Europe is not. And this is why I said at the beginning that I'm afraid that this is the reason that we're not going to be able to have a joint transatlantic tech vision for 2030, which is what we should all be working on together if we actually want to compete with China. And very quickly on your very good point on how do you actually ensure that you have innovation in the startup space. I mean, I think Prime Minister, you were talking about this already. Venture capital, you need private capital. Silicon Valley in the United States, why was it so successful and why has no one really been able to produce that, including the Russians and the Chinese? Well, because it's not a top-down approach. You need the signal from the government, and then you have the bottom-up investment. You need a lot more money and risk. And I think Europe has traditionally been very, very risk-averse. And if you want to innovate, you have to take more risk, and you're going to lose money. But no one's really comfortable with that.
Enrico.
I take your final point because maybe that some good news can come, and the good news is the fact that the Commission probably will take from my report this idea of the 28th virtual state, applying this idea to startup. That is, for me, that can be a game changer. You know, the idea of the 28th virtual state is to say we have 27 business laws in Europe. So corporate laws, each country, some countries like Spain or Germany have regional, so it's a mess. I think when we are discussing about simplification, this is one of the most important parts. But it is very difficult to convince one country to cancel its own corporate law. The only way is to create the 28th virtual state with its own corporate law, European one, that can be a sort of passepartout, a sort of, I would say, fast track. And the Commission, for what I know, is willing to take this idea and to apply this idea on startup. That is the way to accelerate. But we have to be very clear. For startup, the main point is funding. Because when they start growing, then they find an American fund with a lot of money on the table, and
yeah, let's hope the 28th regime is a better success than the AI Act. Any more questions for the audience? Yeah, there's a lady here in the black. And this will be our final question.
Thank you. Maria Dmitruk, University of Warsaw. I wanted to ask, because Ukraine is now the incubator of technologies, of innovation in terms of defense sector, and I was wondering, should there be more talk about how can we, about more cooperation between European defense industry and Ukrainian, what's happening now with drones? And I know there has been some initiatives from European Commission on this topic, but also shouldn't we talk more about this kind of help from Europe, and not only financial aid and sharing our defense capabilities militarily, but also this kind of financing and joint projects on defense, and this kind of two-way aid.
Perfect. It's a great question. Thank you.
I have a very, very concrete answer. That is the fact that, for instance, I come from Madrid this morning. Yesterday we had in Madrid one of the meetings of one of the 65 university alliances that we have in Europe. Because in Europe today we have this system of university alliances, 65, and we are starting involving Ukrainian universities. For instance, yesterday we had in our meeting at IE University with Sciences Po, RT School and the others, and with the Warsaw School of Economics, we had the Kiev School of Economics attending this meeting, and we were starting discussing on how to cooperate exactly on that, because for us, it's a fantastic opportunity, and for them too, it's a great opportunity. So I see this point exactly because yesterday I had the feeling that something is happening on that at the European level.
Sure.
A quick thought and on the defense industrial base question. I mean, this is the big question for Europe now, is how quickly can you actually ramp up your defense industrial base from almost nothing in a lot of countries, not Poland, but a lot of countries. And I think the answer is Ukraine. Obviously, right now, Ukraine has a block on export of its technologies and IP. Whether that's going to change before the war ends seems unlikely. But what you'll hear from Ukrainians is that they have a 20 billion capacity gap in their defense industrial sector, meaning that they can produce 20 billion more of mostly drones, but also other things, for if they only had the investment. Yeah. So again, this is to your point, Ukraine can be the defense industrial base for Europe. And we need to see the opportunity versus seeing Ukraine as some sort of liability. But this is the future, and I think it starts in research cooperation, and it starts in investment, but that's exactly where we need to be heading. But again, I think it's a different panel. It has to be when the war ends, right? Because I don't think they're going to remove those export controls. That's the big, big, big issue.
Yeah, I mean, I can say that in Brussels, Ukraine has rapidly risen up the enlargement order, if you like, because for that exact reason, they see getting them in as an easy way to increase defense production. And then the Danish have just built factories there. People are doing joint ventures. I mean, this is happening at a rapid pace. Ukraine is already inside SAFE, which Britain is not, interestingly enough. We've run out of time, so I have to say, Marta, do you have any final comments, actually? No? Do you have any final comments on that question on Ukraine? Or no. All right, great. Well, listen, thank you so much to the Warsaw Security Forum, but mainly thank you to Enrico, Alina, and Marta. That's all from me as well. Thank you.